All right, let's get right into it. The Baha'i Faith, at its core, is all about divine harmony. But what happens when the words of its founder, Bahá'u'lláh, appear to clash with the teachings of his very own son and successor, Abdu'l-Bahá? Well, that's exactly the tension we're going to explore today. So let's start with a really foundational claim from Bahá'u'lláh himself. He says, and this is key, that contradiction simply has and will not ever have a way in the teachings of divine manifestations. That sets an incredibly high bar for consistency, right? It's a standard we have to use as we look at everything that follows. So who are we talking about here? The two main figures in this story are, on one hand, Bahá'u'lláh, the prophet, the founder, and on the other, you have his son, Abdu'l-Bahá. And Abdu'l-Bahá wasn't just the successor. He was designated as the official interpreter of his father's teachings. And it's the apparent tension between their words that we're really going to dig into. Okay, first up is a really big one. We're talking about the very foundation of the faith. What is its single most important, most fundamental principle? I mean, when you strip everything else away, what's the one thing that's supposed to be at the very top? You'd think there would be a single, straightforward answer, wouldn't you? But right out of the gate, we get two different answers. Abdu'l-Bahá, particularly when he was speaking to Westerners, often emphasized that the number one principle is the search after truth. But if you look at Baha'u'llah's own writings, he seems to point in another direction, saying the oneness of humanity is the most essential principle. And look, this isn't just about splitting hairs over words. This points to a really fundamental question about the entire focus of the faith. Is the main point an individual journey of the mind, seeking truth? Or is it about a collective shared goal, achieving unity? It's a pretty big difference. So that whole question of unity versus individual searching, it leads us right into our next topic. How are followers supposed to think about people who are outside the faith? Yeah, this gets really practical, doesn't it? If you're a believer, what's the official take on how you should view people who aren't? And wow, the contrast here is pretty stark. On one side, Abdu'l-Bahá teaches a message of tolerance. He says you must not label people as ignorant. But then you have his father, Bahá'u'lláh, who is quoted with a very different take, that whoever does not become a Baha'i is actually among the most ignorant of people. I mean, you can really see the tension this creates, right? Does it mean you engage with others as equals, all on a shared search for truth? Or do you see them as fundamentally ignorant until they see the light and accept your faith? It totally changes the whole dynamic of how you'd interact with people of other beliefs. Okay, let's move on. Next up, we're wading into some pretty deep philosophical waters here. It's a question at the heart of so many religions. What's the relationship between our own minds and the divine? And this question really gets to the core of belief itself. How do we know what we know? Can our own minds, just using logic and reason, actually recognize God? And wouldn't you know it, we seem to get two different answers. Abdu'l-Bahá really seems to champion the intellect. He says reason was literally created for the purpose of recognizing God. But then Bahá'u'lláh seems to slam that door shut, saying that recognition of God cannot be obtained by using reason. The implication being it has to come from somewhere else, like pure revelation. So why does this matter so much? Because it gets to the very nature of what faith is. Is it something you can reason your way into? Or is it something that has to be revealed to you from the outside? That's a huge, profound difference in how you approach belief. All right, this last point of tension we're going to look at is really fascinating. It's all about the role of the individual follower. Are you supposed to be a critical thinker or an obedient believer? Check this out. Abdu'l-Bahá is all about personal investigation. He says a fair person is someone who will investigate and do research for themselves. But then you contrast that with Bahá'u'lláh, who seems to command the exact opposite, to accept my words without any questions. Let's just focus on Abdu'l-Bahá's view for a second. It's totally in line with that idea of investigating truth, right? He's really empowering the individual here, telling followers to use their own senses, see with your own eyes, listen with your own ears, to figure things out. But then you put that right up against this instruction from Bahá'u'lláh. When I speak, blindly accept my words. Whoa, that's not just a different emphasis, is it? That sounds like a direct command to switch off the very critical thinking his son was just encouraging. So this really is the core conflict, isn't it? It's personal critical thinking versus total submission to prophetic authority. And these seem to be two incredibly powerful and maybe even opposing forces right at the heart of the faith. Okay, so let's try to pull all of these threads together. What are the key areas of tension that this analysis has brought up? Well, we've seen this tension pop up over and over. First, in the faith's most foundational principles. Then, in attitudes toward outsiders. Then again, with the role of reason in finding faith. And finally, in this tug-of-war between follower obedience and personal investigation. And that leaves us with this huge unresolved question. Are these differences just a matter of context? Maybe they were speaking to different audiences. Or is it about interpretation? Or could they point to a genuine fundamental disagreement at the very core of the Baha'i faith? According to this analysis, that's a question that's still very much open.